What's up, everyone? I'm Ethan. I'm here with my boy Garrett.
What's going on?
And welcome to HIVE Sports, where we talk about all things NFL and college football. Today, we got a banger video for you, doing a recap of the NFL draft. Man, Garrett, what a crazy draft that was, huh?
No, it's fresh off the presses, and there's a lot to dig into. Some stuff that I've really never seen before in all my years of watching the NFL draft, and it's been a lot of them. So excited to jump into it.
For sure. All right, Garrett, I see you wearing that New York Giants gear still. You happy with how they drafted?
Absolutely. I couldn't be happier. I think we got our quarterback of the future. We got some impact players. Abdul Carter's a game wrecker, and we haven't really had an elite pass rusher outside of maybe Dexter Lawrence. But we've been kind of looking for that next elite D end for years, probably since Jason Pierre-Paul left. So it's been a long time coming. We got Cam Skattebo. I think that's a great compliment to Tyrone Tracy. Kind of a little bit of a thunder and lightning approach there.
100%.
Keep both of them healthy, right? You don't have to give the entire workload to either of them. So I'm pretty excited to watch that offense, and we'll see. I think Dart will probably sit for a year or so while he learns and kind of develops with Brian Dable. But do you have any thoughts on my G-Men?
Man, I'm a fan of Skattebo, dude, and I think at that value at the beginning of the fourth round, Tyrone Tracy came in, wide receiver, right, and then turned running back, and so to get somebody that is literally just the polar opposite, right? Tyrone Tracy can be that third down catching those passes. Skattebo just being Skattebo, being a dog. I think I loved that value there too, in the fourth round with the Giants. So I'm stoked for you for sure.
He's someone that we had ranked as a top 5 running back in the class, and we kind of saw the third round as more of a fitting place 100%. For him to go. So getting him at the top of the fourth, I really couldn't be happier with that fit. Tyrone Tracy is very elusive, right? He makes guys miss in the open field. That's kind of his play style. And that's maybe one of the only weaknesses of Cam Skattebo is he's not the most elusive guy. He's kind of like a contact magnet. Is how I heard a few guys mention it. So I thought that was pretty accurate.
I was watching the I don't know, ESPN or somebody, but they call him a Plinko back, right? Where Plinko is like where that little piece just falls back, bounces off every little peg and until it drops. So I thought that was hella funny.
Super fitting, but he's going to be a hammer, and I expect him to be a huge contributor in the red zone, especially. Hopefully, 100%. He scores a lot of touchdowns in Big Blue.
Hopefully, Russ gets you guys to the red zone, huh?
Yeah, that's the one thing I'm a little concerned about. It's going to be a patchwork at quarterback until Dart's ready to step in.
But they got it, dude. Hey, they brought in a lot of good pieces for Russ with Neighbors, and now they got Skattebo, and So I'm excited for them.
Yeah, and the defensive line I think is going to be impressive. With Carter, Dexter Lawrence, they did draft another interior pass rusher. They got Brian Burns in that trade last year. Thibodeau, if he can ever put it together. So lots of like, man. But how about your Jaguars? What do you think about them?
Come on, man. Travis Hunter, baby, man. What an obviously, Every Jacksonville fan knows that we gave a lot for Travis Hunter. We gave next year's first round draft pick. But when you're talking about generational talent, talking about a guy that can play on both sides of the ball, one thing I love too about this pick is it's also exciting. Like the Jags need something exciting for once, right? Jacksonville fans have just every year. I think I saw a stat. It was like 6 of the past 7 years we've missed the playoffs. So just getting a guy that is a real game changer was just like a breath of fresh air, man.
Absolutely. And I think if you can get a truly elite talent, you got to make the move. And you give up firsts and you give up seconds and everyone says, oh, it's too much value. But those picks are maybe, below a 50% hit rate anyways, right?
100%.
So they're not sure things in 2026. We don't know what kind of draft class it's going to be yet. So just to secure that elite wide receiver, and I think they did mention, you probably heard more about this than me, but they plan on incorporating him first as a full-time wide receiver, I think, and then they're going to kind of ease him into a defensive role and kind of let that grow as he matures in the NFL. But, let me know if you heard something different because I'm all ears.
Yeah, and I really like that fit too, right? The Jags need that offensive weapon, and I think the fact that we drafted Caleb Ransaw in the third as our next pick, who's also a DB, kind of tells us that yes, Travis Hunter's probably going to come in more as that elite wide receiver with Brian Thomas Jr. as his counterpart, and then also still be utilized. I mean, talk about a first draft move for James Gladstone as the new GM, coming in as a 34-year-old GM with Liam Cohen, the new head coach. I mean, you got to make a splash, and I just love that, man.
The offensive mastermind in Liam Cohen, man. You saw how that Bucs offense was just humming with him,
100%.
calling the plays. So for him to not only inherit Brian Thomas Jr., but then add Travis Hunter to that mix on top of some of the other guys that you guys already have, right? I mean, they drafted a couple running backs that we don't want to forget about. So
That's true.
It's a lot of weapons there, man. I mean, Tutton, LaQuint Allen, you already have Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby there. So it's
100%.
Going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, and people forget that we still have Gabe Davis. We still have De'Ami Brown. I'm excited for what we have this year. But
Brenton Strange.
Yeah. Now that Evan Ingram is out of both of our teams have had Evan Ingram, who had a great seasons with the Giants and the Jags. But go ahead and go with the Broncos. But anyways, man, let's get into some other draft winners. Let's you got any teams that you thought really stood out to you in the draft?
Yeah, so the first team that stood out was the Texans, and I really like what they did surrounding Stroud with some weapons, because at times last year when Nico Collins was banged up, when Tank Dell just absolutely destroyed his leg, poor guy, Stephon Diggs tore his ACL, I believe, in the beginning of the season. So he really, at times, was working with very little at wide receiver, and I think they added both Iowa State wide receivers who I thought were good values. They did get Jaden Higgins a little earlier than I expected, taking him over Luther Burden. What do you think about that?
I was surprised. Obviously, we had Luther Burden as a number 5 receiver, but they like those long. I mean, Nico Collins is a big wide receiver. Jaden Higgins, he performed well at the combine. He had a great college career, 6'4", 215. He was highly rated on a lot of other kind of analysts or people with their top 5. So I wasn't surprised that he went that high, but I do like the fact that we don't know what we're going to get when the Texans are going to get Tank Dell again. Stephon Diggs is gone. You needed another weapon that you could just throw out there right away, and I think Jaden Higgins was a great pick for them.
Yeah, he's definitely going to be the perimeter guy, right? And then it looks like Jalen Noel and Christian Kirk are going to vie for that slot role, and maybe they'll go 4 wide receiver sets more often than not. But that's a lot of weapons for
100%.
Stroud.
100%. I think I was a little bit surprised they didn't go even more on the offensive line, just because I know Stroud was, running away from some people quite a bit in games, but. Their second pick in the second round with Arianti Ursiri. I mean, he's a highly rated offensive tackle out of Minnesota. So, I'm excited to see what they do as a team for sure.
And they got some running back depth behind Joe Mixon as well with Woody Marks. He's a pretty good pass catching back. So Stroud should be set up pretty well as long as the offensive line holds up. That's my main concern with the Texans. But moving on to the Ravens, right? That's the other team that I think you noticed stood out.
Yeah, man, and the Ravens are a team that had a great defense last season, but sometimes if it ain't broke, keep doing that, right? And so they got so much good value on defense with their first 2 picks. Malachi Starks at the 27th pick in the first round is such good value, and then to get Mike Green at the 54th pick, right? Somebody who could have easily been a first rounder and nobody would have batted an eye. I also saw a stat that I think there was like a 1% chance that Mike Green was to drop to the 54th overall pick. So really, really like the fact that they just got so much value, because we know how good the Ravens are. Would I have liked them to pick an elite receiver earlier? Probably, to kind of help Zay Flowers, help Mark Andrews. But when you have so much good value in front of you, and now you get another safety that can work with Kyle Hamilton and just really solidify that secondary, they're going to be a dangerous team coming into this season for sure.
And defense is such a worthwhile investment in the AFC, right? With all those elite quarterbacks,
100%.
you really got to make sure you have a studly defense out there. And the Ravens have made a lot of investments, getting some athletic freaks out there to combat Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes,
100%.
Josh Allen, and so on.
And speaking of athletic freak, I have to mention their 4th-round pick. Teddy Buchanan's a transfer from Davis, went to Cal and just shined at Cal in the ACC. A guy that's like long, rangy, athletic. I mean, I think his combine numbers were some of the top across the board out of all linebackers. 40-inch vert at 6'2", 230 something pounds. Like, the dude's an animal, long and rangy, who can play inside, but really fills the hole really well. So love the fact that they just are picking really athletic guys that can play all over the field.
Yep, you see Kyle Hamilton just crossing, he's sideline to sideline. He's a
100%.
truly special safety. They got a Dafe Owe, I think, who's one of the fastest 260 plus pound men in the world. So they really know how to identify those athletic freaks, and I'm excited to see how good that defense is going to be next year.
100%. And they got a lot of good effort guys. So that's all the Ravens are. They're just guys that keep hustling. So.
Can they make the next step though? I mean, that's the question, right? Can
we'll
they
see.
Get to the Super Bowl? We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. But anyways, what about a second team, Garrett? Any other teams that stood out to you?
Yeah, the second team that stood out to me was the Chicago Bears. And man, bringing in Ben Johnson, they're going to have high expectations at offense, right? But they did everything they possibly could to surround Caleb Williams with weapons. And that offense is looking dangerous. You got DJ Moore, Rome Odunze at wide receiver. You added Luther Burden as your 3rd wide receiver. You got an elite tight end in Colston Loveland. So Caleb's going to have very, very little excuses. I know they invested a lot of money in the offensive line as well with Caleb on a rookie contract. So I'm excited to see what they can do next year.
Yeah, and they added a big offensive lineman in Ozzie Trapilo out of Boston College too. So they're definitely trying to protect Caleb, because I think at times last season that's what really stood out was Caleb's kind of frantically moving around because he doesn't have time to make his reads and kind of throw to these elite weapons that he has. But I gotta ask, Garrett, Colston Loveland. I know we were high on him, but I mean, I think there was a lot of shock that he was a tight end 1 coming out of the draft, right?
Yeah, everyone expected it to be Tyler Warren, and I think we gave Tyler Warren the nudge as well, but we did preface it a little bit by saying these two guys are very close, and Colston Loveland could easily have been the number 1 tight end in the class in a lot of years. So I think both of those guys are going to be impactful at the next level. And Colston Loveland to the Bears was a little surprising for me, man. I'm going to be honest, because I know they gave Cole Kmet that contract a year or two ago. And, they paid him a good amount of money. So I'm kind of surprised. It seems like they're moving in another direction. Because I would say, personally, Colston Loveland is just a tier above Cole Kmet pretty clearly.
Yeah. Well, and the reason I like this pick a lot, actually, is, we mentioned in our previous video how elite of a route runner Colston Loveland was, right? And he really had that passing threat. And if you're going all in with a Ben Johnson offense, you're telling Caleb, like, I'm giving you the reins to just score a lot of points. Why not draft the best route running tight end who, his route running, his pass catching ability is elite. And I think, I wasn't shocked that he was picked over Tyler Warren because he fits so well with this Bears offense.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think Ben Johnson is going out there trying to find his Sam Laporta, right? And he's trying to.
100%.
It seems like he's trying to emulate that Lions offense, right? He's building the elite offensive line, getting just a plethora of weapons out there, very similarly to the Lions, right? And
100%.
I think there's an argument to be made that Caleb Williams has a much higher ceiling than Jared Goff. So you never know, man. There could be a changing of the guard coming soon.
I don't know if that's an argument. Caleb Williams has a clear higher ceiling than Jared Goff. Now,
100%, yeah.
Is he at that level of Jared Goff yet? Probably not. But we'll see what season two has in store for us for sure.
It's going to be an interesting division for sure. I mean, the Packers made a lot of investments as well, so it'll be interesting to see how that division shakes out.
100%.
But just moving on to your second team, you had another team that caught your eye, right?
Yeah, and it's funny, as a Jags fan, people would think that I, would be upset with the Browns taking advantage of, but I think the Browns had a very good draft. The fact that they made that trade down to the fifth overall pick, got an elite defense tackle in Mason Graham, right? Elite pass rusher at that position, and has a lot of tools to be a very good defense tackle early on in his career. And the fact that they were able to get a first round pick to next year, I think you have to throw that into this, right? You have to throw that into them being a winner in this draft. But really love, their pick at, Carson Swessinger out of UCLA, a top-rated linebacker. They needed that. That was one of the main needs that they needed on defense. But then I loved their two-headed monster. Quinshon Judkins was one of our top running backs, right? And the fact that they got him and Dylan Sampson as two guys that a lot of people believed could have been in the top 5 of running backs in this draft, man. Right. So what do you think about those two being drafted on the same team?
I thought it was awesome because they really complement each other well, right? We talked about Tracy and Cam Scatteraboo complementing each other well. I think this is a very similar situation. You look at Quinshon Judkins just being a violent runner, kind of we comped him to Leonard Fournette. And then Dylan Sampson just going to be obviously not nearly as physical, but he's got that. He's slippery, right? He's slippery and he's fast, and I think he would have ran 4.3s if he ran at the combine. So he's a guy who can go out there and make some big plays as well. So the Browns did very well, I think, to upgrade their backfield.
Totally, and I think they officially moved on from Nick Chubb. Jerome Ford is still on that depth chart, but could definitely see Quinshon Judkins early on taking the reins, and then like you're saying, Dylan Sampson being that that kind of counterpunch to the Quinshon Judkins. What about Harold Fannin? I think early third round, we were higher on him than a lot of people were, but I think early third round is pretty good landing spot for him. What do you think?
Yeah, I thought that was a good value pick, and they do have David Njoku, but he's getting up there a little bit in age. He's been in the league for a long time, kind of taken a little bit of injuries throughout his career, so we don't know how long he's going to last, but I mean, he doesn't have to step in and be the starter right away, and I think that's a good thing for his development. To be able to sit and learn behind a guy like David Njoku is going to be beneficial for him in the long run.
Totally, and we comped him, right? Comped him similarly to Isaiah Likely, and I really could see Cleveland doing a lot of what Baltimore is doing with Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, right? They have two really good pass-catching tight ends, and Cleveland now has that. Harold Fannin produced so well in college and showed us that with the ball in his hands, he can be an elite pass catcher. So the fact that they have David Njoku as kind of that, speedy, long tight end, and you have Harold Fannin, who's just a consistent pass catcher, I really love that pick, and I think they could really work well together, in Cleveland.
Absolutely, and I think the Shedeur Sanders pick was great value in the fifth.
Let's talk about that, man. Tell me how you're feeling about Shedeur being in the 5th round. Dylan Gabriel 2 rounds before him in the 3rd, being drafted, on the same team. Like there's a lot going on here, right?
I mean, I've never seen a fall like this in NFL draft history, I don't think. I'm sure there's been some comparable ones, but this is something like I've never seen before. So, I mean, I think we both agreed that he was a first-round talent. And if he didn't go in the first round, I think he deserved to go on day 2 at the very least. And to slip all the way to day 3, the Browns didn't even use their first day 3 pick on him. So I don't really understand the drop, but I do think we like him a little more than Dylan Gabriel, right, who they took in the 3rd round.
Yeah, I mean, again, and, I'm curious your thoughts on the whole, especially as a Giants fan now with Jackson Dart. We obviously had Shedeur as our number 2 quarterback. Jackson Dart was our number 3. But clearly, Brian Dable and the Giants staff really felt like Jackson Dart was the far superior player. Do you have any thoughts about, were you hoping for Shedeur at that 21 spot? And then, when they picked Jackson Dart, you were like, okay, that's, still a good pick. Like, how are you feeling about that?
Yeah, I think I had to do a little bit of reevaluating at first, because we did have a little bit of a teardrop after Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders to Jackson Dart. I wouldn't say it's anything crazy. We thought Jackson was a very good quarterback in his own right. He was our number 3 guy, so it's not like there was a huge gap between those guys. But I did look into it a little more in depth because I was curious, and
Yeah.
I do think Brian Dable is a good quarterback evaluator, man. And we saw what he did with Josh Allen in
Yeah.
Buffalo, so it made me do a little bit of a double take. And I looked at some of the stats, and Sanders took 150 sacks throughout his career at Jackson State in Colorado, and Jackson Dart, playing in the SEC, only took 72, right? So less than half of the total sacks. I think the sacks were a problem. Shedeur's holding on to the ball a little too long, trying to play hero ball at times. And I know one justification we used for him was, hey, his offensive line was trash, right?
Yeah.
So I looked into that also, and Jackson Dart didn't have a better offensive line than Shedeur Sanders, surprisingly. I mean, you look at Ole Miss's pass blocking grade on PFF, they were ranked 11 out of 16 teams in the SEC, and they had a 63 pass blocking grade, right? And then you look at Colorado, not a good offensive line either, but 14 out of 16 in the Big 12 and had a 71 passing grade. So they actually had a better passing grade than Ole Miss. And I will say the SEC defenders are a little scarier than those Big 12 guys, in my opinion.
You know, yeah. And I think I'm not surprised if Jackson Dart was picked over Shedeur Sanders. Like, we had him as our number 2 quarterback. The fact that Jackson Dart was selected, in the first round and Shedeur maybe dropped was not surprising. What's shocking to me is the fact that he dropped from pretty clearly a late first round or second round draft grade to beginning of the 5th round, right? And you have guys like Dylan Gabriel, Tyler Shuck being drafted in front of Shedeur Sanders, who has a lot of tools that a lot of evaluators really like, right? Like what else? I mean, I know there's talk about interviews, right, Garrett? Is that
I mean, it has to be something with the intangibles, right? Because I think we can both agree, based on the tape, he was a high-end quarterback prospect in this class. I mean, he's one of the most accurate passers in college history. And he's a guy, he's being talked about top 5. So, I mean, there's a reason why he's being talked about in that range. So there has to be something that we're not seeing, something behind the scenes. Who knows what's going on, man? There could be some power struggles at play with Dion and whatnot. But there had to be something else to it.
But you know what? There were a lot of anonymous tips and these interviews from this anonymous source, like they weren't good. Like if this wasn't Deion Sanders' kid, and he if it wasn't for the fact that he was just kind of forced into the spotlight his whole career, I don't think we would be saying nearly as much of this stuff, right? And I think Nick Saban really put it well. When one or two teams kind of start whispering and maybe don't pick Shedeur, then the other teams are kind of looking around and be like, oh, well, maybe we shouldn't be picking him. Like, maybe we should let him drop. I mean, the Steelers had nobody at quarterback. You have nobody at quarterback, and you're not going to take this kid in the 3rd, 4th, or 5th round. I'm glad that the Browns finally drafted him, because they were a team that also really needed a quarterback, and you picked Dylan Gabriel in the late 3rd, and that's not your forever. I mean, I'm sorry. Dylan Gabriel had a great college career and is one of the best college quarterbacks we've seen in a while. But at the next level, he's way undersized, doesn't have a very strong arm. Like, he's not your quarterback of the future. And the fact that Shedeur is like almost being punished for having this confidence and being Deion's kid, like I truly think he's being a little bit punished because of that. Now, again, I wasn't in any of these interviews. Could he have rubbed people the wrong way? Sure. And if that's the case, I will take all this back. But right now, a lot of this is like anonymous sources and people really not speaking up about it. And like, come on, I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's hearsay, right? I mean, you're the litigator over here. So.
It is, man. It is.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of rumors, and there's not a lot of substance to it at the end of the day. But there had to be something that rubbed teams the wrong way. And I will say, he didn't perform at the combine. He kind of he took the road of, hey, I'm a clear can't miss prospect. I'm not going to even throw at the combine. I'm not going to do the athletic testing. Skipping the 40 is one thing for a quarterback. I don't think that's a big deal. But just not passing, I think that kind of hurt him, especially when Jackson Dart came in there. Yeah. And he had a very good combine, man. He ran a 4.7 at 225, which is pretty athletic, and then he threw very well. So I think that kind of separated the two. And there was rumors that the Giants did a ton of work on Shedeur Sanders pre-draft. So I don't think it was like an easy Jackson Dart decision. I think that they were doing their due diligence on both of these guys, and it just so worked out that Shedeur slipped the way he did. I think it was kind of fluky, not necessarily indicative of what kind of prospect he is.
100%. And I think, there's been a lot of great Hall of Fame quarterbacks. Not saying that Shedeur is going to be a Hall of Famer, but a lot of great quarterbacks that were drafted on day 3. And, there's nothing better than, having a chip on your shoulder going into the next level. And I think, just because he was drafted in the 5th round, I think he still has a great opportunity to, make an impact early on the Browns. So definitely excited to see what he does. Excited to see what all these prospects, all these teams do with these the 2025 talent.
Definitely a very, very entertaining 2025 NFL draft. A lot to write home about, and I think the future is looking bright for the Giants and the Jags. So it'll be fun to watch.
Yep. Well, with that, we appreciate all of you. If you made it this far along, please leave a like, comment, subscribe, share our videos, please. We're just starting right now and we're trying to grow. But be on the lookout for more NFL draft content, NFL content, college, all of the above. We're going to try to pump out good quality content for you all.
Yep. Let us know what you want to hear from next, and we got plenty of content coming your way. And thanks for tuning in.
Awesome. Thanks all.
All right. Bye.